Hello, it's June, it's 2025, and there's been a Kill Team FAQ slash errata pass, and it's like a million different PDFs, and here's what they all say. So, the FAQ errata pass mostly tells us things we already know, but they've also managed to update nearly every team. So there's a lot of information and not that much data. Okay, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of words. Every single team is showing us updated on the website, and then when you go through them, only most of them have actually had an update. But they've reformatted all the cards to a nice print and play format. So you can take that down and get it printed off somewhere nicely and get it put on cards, and probably achieve the card pack for less money, which would be quite cool. One thing they've done, which I think is absolutely splendid, it's so splendid that I had an AI create for me this word splendid. I said, render the word splendid in a splendid manner, and it did. The updates are labeled June 25 instead of like version 2.1 or whatever it was doing before, where the version numbers were for the team. So Plague Marines could be on version 3, but like Krieg could be on version 2, but they were both the most recent version that had changed, and it was very, very difficult for me to go through and work out what the changes were. They've made that really easy, so it is splendid. Absolutely splendid. And for that alone, I cannot possibly be grumpy about anything else in this FAQ, because it is absolutely splendid. Thank you, Games Workshop. Really good. Really good. Absolutely splendid is the word. So there's been some core book changes, and I'm going to read them. So Killzone, Volkus, City Fight Rules, Door Fight. Change the first sentence of the second effect to read, in the select enemy operative step, instead select an enemy operative on the Killzone floor and within 2 of and on the other side of a door that the active operative is touching. If you are normal, you are already playing it this way. There are some people out there who I don't know are mad geniuses who were like, well, technically, if you're near a door, because the way it's worded, I can target someone on a floor above the door within 2 of the other side of the door. I have no time for people that want to play the game that way. You know where you both know that that's not what the rule is supposed to do, but you like, oh, but rules is written, that's what it says. Cool. Rules is written, I'm no longer having any fun. Right? But nobody I know of, and I have attended tournaments, was trying to argue this, so good. But it presumably needed ruling that way for someone somewhere. We got changed to torrent rules. Change the first sentence to reset the valid target as normal as primary target, then select any number of other valid targets within X of the first valid target, but not within control range of friendly operatives. So I guess they felt the need to clarify that, like, if you can't use the torrents rule to jump onto somebody that's in combat, right? I really thought that in the core rules, when they had that term valid target, the valid target couldn't be a control range or a friendly operative. And they felt need to add this clarification. I don't think it needs to be there, but there you go. Now, this change, I think, actually changes the game, and not just for weirdos. Operatives can jump from vantage terrain higher than 2 inches from the kill zone floor. So the first part is a change for the sort of people that want to deliberately break the game, who were like climbing on top of barricades and then jumping off them to avoid like a mine on the other side of the barricade or something. Yeah, that's nonsense. So that's the first change. But then down here, I think we've got a significant change that that seems new to me. When jumping from a terrain feature, if there is a rampart at the edge that you would jump to, you must climb it first before doing so, but still jump from the level of the vantage terrain. And then you can ignore the height difference of 1 or less, including its rampart of any. So So you still have to climb the rampart. It's just making sure that you know that you're not jumping from Because the way it used to be written, which they've crossed out the bottom, when jumping from a terrain feature, if it has a rampart, you must climb it first. Like, in that specific scenario, I would have measured from the top of the rampart, because that's straight up what the rule instructs you to do. So because they've now ruled that you can only jump from the vantage point, while you still have to pay the tax as if the rampart was there, you jump from the level of the vantage point, which makes sense, makes things easier, and ties it in with the rest of the rules, which is pretty cool. And we got some FAQ questions. Question: if my operative is on vantage terrain and shooting with a weapon which has the seek light weapon rule against an operative in cover from light terrain, can I elect only to use the seek weapon rule, denying the improved cover saves from the vantage terrain rule? Yes. So there is a rule in Kill Team which many people ignore, at the sort of mid-tables, where when you're shooting somebody from vantage, they actually get an improved cover save if they're behind light terrain. How often does light terrain actually come up? Like, almost never. And a lot of people forget that rule. This clarifying that if you're playing properly and not forgetting that rule, you don't have to use vantage to get around light terrain if you could instead be using seek to get around light terrain. Right? I hope that makes sense. Question: in the third effect of vantage terrain for purposes obscured, what does heavy terrain connected to vantage terrain mean? Connected refers to any part of the same terrain feature. This one is kind of nuts. This has always been how it's written, and it's never been how anybody has played it that I've played against. Right? Technically, if you're on vantage terrain, you can ignore any part of the terrain piece that you're on for the purposes of obscuring. And so obviously the thing here is with the strongholds in Killzone Voltus, right? It seems absurd. And so, like, it seems absurd that, like, when I've discussed this with Zimbad, we've been like, oh, technically the rules seem to say that him being on this platform here means that he ignores the whole of this massive house for obscuring, which seems mad, so we've ignored it. But now Games Workshop are like doubling down there, no, that's what we mean. If you're on the vantage point on a stronghold, you can ignore the entire stronghold for the purposes of obscured. So I guess that's the rule. It's kind of dumb, but I guess it's the rule. Question. Now this is where we actually get into what I consider to be material changes to the game because of my previous understanding of the game. Does the initial movement cost to climb or move through accessible terrain features count towards the distance restrictions of rules, e.g. the Plague Marine's Lumbering Death? Yes. So previously, I would have said, no. You know, that the range is calculated as the crow flies, so the actual distance in inches that you've moved on the table. And the reason that I assumed that, and would have thought that way, is because that's how the reposition now works in the scouting phase, right, where you can you care about the 3 inches as the crow flies, but you have the full 6 inches to spend on taxes, and it just seems to be a better reading of the rules. But no, this is what they want to do. They want it to count all tax, all climbs, accessible terrain, all these things. They all count for the distance that you've moved. Now, you might be thinking, well, this is a fairly minor thing. Yes, let's look at the next FAQ. Question: does the initial movement cost to move through an accessible terrain feature count towards the maximum of 2 inches that an operative can move during a counteract? Yes. And this means that operatives cannot normally move through accessible terrain during a counteraction. So, weird thing, I was at the Turning Point Tactics weekend tournament, and you know, as Ryan likes to do, he actually went through like FAQ questions and how we'd be ruling them for that tournament. And he said this, he said you cannot counteract through a hatchway. And there are a lot of people, like people actually said to me afterwards, oh, I wouldn't have ruled it that way. I don't really agree. Like obviously that's what we're playing, but I don't think that's the rule. Turns out, don't know whether he had advance notice that was how it was going to be ruled. Turns out though, that is the rules. You cannot counteract through an accessible a door or anything like that because you can only counteract 2 inches, and that counts all climbs, accessible terrain, all taxes. So essentially, with the one exception of the scout move, in the scouting phase when you get to reposition but only move up to 3 inches as the crow flies, but with your whole 6-inch budget or whatever you have, in general, for Kill Team, you never measure as the crow flies and go, I've now moved 3 inches. You have to count in all the little deductions and taxes and things that you've actually paid for the climbs and accessible and stuff. So that's really interesting. Question: when does a player keep the initiative until? Answer: until the winner of the roll-off decides who has initiative in the next initiative step. So, and happily, they could have left it there and we'd all be like, what? But now they've explained the point. They said this means the player that had initiative in the previous turning point would resolve the precedence of any simultaneous rules affecting the next initiative step. So if there's stuff that happens at the start of the next activation, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but if there's stuff that's going to happen at the start of the next activation before you roll for initiative, then the player with initiative from the previous round decides the order. Okay, fine. Yeah, I guess someone has to decide the order, and that's really the only way you could do it if there's things that have to happen before the initiative roll. Right now, I can't think of any effects that resolve before the initiative roll. If you could think of one, let me know in the comments. I mean, the things like, yeah, I can't think of anything. Question: when a rule states in the order of your choice, e.g., the sanctifier, confessors lead the possession, is that referring to conceal or engage orders? Answer: no. In an order of your choice refers to the sequence in which the rule is resolved. In this example's case, the sequence in which the operatives move. So this seems to be a confusion that's probably come from somebody who is English as an additional language, right? So where they've been like, well, what's going on with order and order, the order of things, but also got the conceal, engage order. Why are we using the same word for two totally different concepts? Like what mode the model is in and what sequence we're going to carry things out. Why is that the same word? Because English is a weird language, right? That's, you get, there's no reason really why the orders that you would get from a sergeant in the military have to be the same as the sequence that you would perform activities in. Put these things in order can mean put these things in sequence, and these are your orders means these are your instructions. So yes, some people have been laughing at this one, and I just think it probably arises from people where in their native language there's a totally separate word for instructions given and things put in sequence. Like if we referred to them as this model is on a conceal instruction, this model is on an engage instruction, and you and you can do this first or second, like yeah. So fine, good. I'm glad it didn't personally confuse me because presumably because I'm a native English speaker. If that's where I'm assuming this is coming from, and that's fine. I know Games Workshop has localized the rules into other languages, but I'm also pretty certain that the other languages translations I've heard before are occasionally bad. So I'm sure that's the problem. And also they localize them into like major languages, but like the game's played in all over the world. Like I'm not sure it's localized into every language in which it's played, right? In the core rules, it says, now this one really interested me. In the core rules, it says you can never roll dice more than you can never re-roll a dice roll more than once. Can I use the rule to make my opponent re-roll a dice that's already been re-rolled? E.g., Hand of the Archon, Sky Splinter Assassin, Omen, Warp Coven, Sorcerer of Destiny, Ravish Destiny. No. And again, one of the benefits of doing this a day late is that I've seen other people's takes, and everyone's like, well, yeah, obviously. And I'm like, well, this one really wasn't obvious to me. Maybe I'm just dumb. But everybody that's been in Games Workshop games is aware that in all their games, there's this general prohibition you can never re-roll a re-roll. Okay, and it's always expressed like, oh, you can't re-roll a re-roll. But that's always been filed in my brain, at least, as a prohibition against just spamming out re-roll abilities until you get the result you want. It hadn't occurred to me. It really hadn't occurred to me. And if it had occurred to you, well done, Gold Star, because you got the rules right. But it hadn't occurred to me that in the scenario that you roll a miss and then you spend a CP to re-roll it into a hit, that dice is then protected from any ability your opponent might have to force you to re-roll successful hits or crits. Right? That not apparent to me. So I think this is also This is, for me, in terms of my games that I'm going to play, this is the one that I think actually, that one and the movement thing. If I hadn't been to that tournament where Ryan had already ruled that as an FAQ and wasn't in my mind, the movement one will be the biggest one. But as it stands, this one about not being able to force your opponent to re-roll a dice that they themselves have previously re-rolled I think is a big deal. And that's the core book changes. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my take, right? Let me know, like, no, fairly fool, this thing about the order of your choice is super impactful to everybody, or something like that. Let me know. Vespid. Question: if there are no enemy operatives within 8 inches of friendly Vespid Stingwing operative, do I need to spend a communion point to target an enemy operative more than 8 inches from it? Yes. Sucks to suck Vespid. Like, I really don't like the design of Vespid in terms of the rules, because I really don't like it when your main special thing that you have to remember is a disadvantage. That's like, that sucks. So yeah, sucks to suck. And also, Vespid players, you probably knew this was the way this was going to go, and you were just trying your luck by asking questions of the TO to see if you get something that felt better, right? But then people who actually play Vespid tell me that the communion point rule is not the problem, and Vespid just suck, even if you didn't worry about communion points. In which case, like, fine, understood. Why it's still really bad game design then? Because even if it's basically ignorable, what? Why don't we just ignore? Like, if they have so many communion points as to make it pointless, then that's worse, right? You see that that's actually worse than just having a mechanic that's punishing to you when you're playing, right? I really dislike Vespid's rules. Hierotex Circle. So there's a bit of a grammar tidy up here. This is, and I genuinely believe this is for clarification. This is, some people have labelled this as a nerf or to the Despotech. I generally believe this is a clarification. So this is for the Chronomancer, the Psychomancer, the Technomancer. So all of the Mancers, right? And they have an ability to do interstitial command. So they've changed the relevant part of the second sentence to read visible to within 6 inches of this operative, or visible to within 6 inches of a friendly Despotech. And it used to read visible to within 6 inches of this operative, or within 6 inches of a friendly Despotech. And so, like, you would read this as visible to and within 6 inches of this operative or a friendly Despotech, which it must also be visible to, right? But the way they'd written it out kind of caused confusion. I like that they've added these extra words to clarify it, because it reminds me of in programming where you have to write, you can't write if x is greater than 4 or less than 1. You have to write if x is greater than 4 or x is greater than 1, right? It's having to repeat the entire logical proposition on either side of the Boolean operator, like you would have to in a programming language. That's what they've done with this. Then instead of repeating the entire logical proposition on either side of the or, which is a Boolean logical operator, right? Technically, and it makes it make sense. Like, this might feel a little more clunky to again to an English speaker where you're used to kind of carrying over that first part of the proposition, but it actually makes more logical sense and is more understandable to everybody. So that's good. And again, the number of people I've seen that have done videos that have been like, oh, it's a nerf to Despotech. Well, that means that they were reading it wrong, and therefore that's why we've had to have this clarification. So good job. Rules commentary. Question: can a operative on guard interrupt and perform a point-blank shot against an enemy operative within control range of another friendly operative using the magnify weapon rule? Obviously not, no. Again, I don't understand the mindset. I'm going to moan about this a lot. I don't understand the mindset of a person that looks at the rule set and goes, oh, look, shenanigans. Oh, look, a thing that I can technically do that obviously isn't intended. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it a lot. I'm going to do it a lot until I have to FAQ it. Yeah. Why? It's a game? Sure. Blades of Cain. Blades of Cain. So, striking scorpion aspect techniques. Strike and fade. The first sentence is changed to read. Use this aspect technique when a friendly striking scorpion operative incapacitates an enemy operative while fighting or retaliating and is no longer within 3 inches of enemy operatives. It used to say, like, during the fight action. Is it a fight action when you're retaliating? I would say so, but maybe the fight action isn't a concept technically in the rules. That's why they changed it to while fighting or retaliating. Fine, yeah, it doesn't really change how I would have thought that was played, but sure. Let's look at the Q&As. Question. If I use the Rain of Tears Howling Banshee aspect technique, but am prevented from performing a free fall back action as a result of my opponent's rules, e.g. Nemesis Claw's Chain Snare, what happens? The aspect technique is still used, the fight sequence ends, but the Blades of Cain Howling Banshee operative remains in its current location. So for those of you not intimately familiar with the rules of every single team in Kill Team, Rain of Tears lets you end the combat after you strike with a crit, so you discard all life, the combat ends, and then you fall back. What this is saying is, being able to fall back isn't necessary to perform the first part of the action. So you could still choose to do it because you still get to end the combat, and that might be advantageous to you. Easy, good, sensible. Not sure how I would have thought that would have worked. It's never come up for me. I don't think I've played Blades of Cain in this edition. But when I did, I would have played with Howling Banshees, so there you go. Question. If I use the strike and fade striking scorpion aspect technique, could an opponent interrupt my activation, e.g. as a result of the guard action, before I change the Blades of Cain striking scorpion operative's order to conceal? So, just before I read the answer, strike and fade is change to a conceal and then do a dash. The answer says no, but they can interrupt before the striking scorpion operative performs the free dash action. Interesting, right? So changing an order is not presumably an action, but then before the dash, yeah. Do you know, again, it's one of those things, it probably needed FAQing because it seems not obvious to me. Really niche, but not obvious. Cool. Sanctifiers. We'll see this again and again. Conflagrator operatives twin torrent rule. First sentence change to read, select up to 2 different valid targets that aren't within control range of friendly operatives. So, it used to say select up to 2 valid targets, and people were like, oh, does that mean, can I just shoot the same guy twice? No, you cannot. You can't. There you go. And then we've got the Cherub. The Cherub has just gotten the updated rules for Super Conceal, which, if you've been watching these for a while, there was a balance pass where they updated everything with some version of even when you're on Vantage, they can still hide behind light terrain, to the same boilerplate ruling. And so this tells me that the Sanctifiers book went to print a million years ago, and now they brought this back in to go, oh yeah, the Super Conceal. We'll change that here as well. Kill Team really needs universal. The thing is, I don't like universal special rules because I don't like having to look things up constantly in a list or memorize all these things. But it would be easier from a bookkeeping point of view if they could just change a rule. There is no rule called Super Conceal, right? For the Cherub, it's called the Cherub, and for all the other little critters, it's called some other thematic name. And the fact that we all call it Super Conceal, it's like a fan mandated equivalent of a universal special rule. We call it Super Conceal so that we can have a shared terminology and communicate effectively, right? Rules commentary. Question. Some rules require an operative to shoot or fight against a specific operative or its activation is cancelled, such as the Mandrake Dirge Maul, Exaction Squad Execution Order. If my opponent uses such a rule and I cancel the shoot or fight action with my Sanctifier Confessor Operative's Commanding Declamation rule, what happens? Now, this one has blown out my brain cells, okay? So the Commanding Declamation rule, remember, it's this way. I forget exactly how it works, but it's like a randomly generated thing. I think you roll a dice, and on some random result, you get to say, no, you can't fight or shoot, or whichever you were trying to do. That action's gone, it's dead. But it only works once per game, right? And once it's been used, it's been used. So they've come up with, do not cancel the enemy operative's activation. It can continue to perform actions other than the prevented one as normal. So Dirgemore activates, attacks you, you roll commanding declamation, you succeed, the attack is cancelled. This is the way I read it. The attack is cancelled insofar as you take no damage, but the attack is not cancelled insofar as the Dirgemore is then free to do whatever it wants to do with its second, whether if it wants to move or dash or flip an objective or gargle. It has attempted to attack you for the purposes of its forced to attack you. It's fulfilled its obligation. That's under hunting focus. It's attempted to attack. It's been prevented, but it's attempted to do it. So it doesn't cancel its activation. Is I think how that works, but that's not what Glass Half Dead said. So maybe it's still too vague, but that's what I think it's saying. It's actually a buff to the Dirgemore, the Exaction Squad, people like that, in that they can try and attack, and if it gets turned off for them, they can still then do whatever else they might want to do or not do, right? It still happens. The attack was still attempted. They fulfilled their rule. Question. If my opponent uses a firefight ploy that requires an operative to perform a shoot or fight action, and I cancel the action with the Sanctify Confessor operative's commanding decimation, is the CP refunded? No. So, and it's in the simile, any rules where a restricted number of uses that are prevented will still be considered used. So it's basically the action isn't cancelled, even though that's the wording they've used. The action happens, it just has no effect, is I think the sane way to think about it, right? So in this case, it's it works out as a debuff for the non-sanctifier player, right? You do it, and you've done it, you've spent the CP, you've thrown the crack grenade, whatever it might be, it just doesn't do anything. Right? Good. So commanding declamation is not really an undo, it's just oh, that didn't do anything. I think that's the way you need to think about it. I think that's what they're getting at, but maybe it's not so clear. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments. Novitiates. Yes. They have a ploy, Blessed Rejuvenation, which lets you heal after an act of faith has been performed. And they're just saying that you can't do it if the friendly operative was incapacitated during the action. Right? So if you're dead, you can't heal. And then we'll read the next one, which is question. If a novitiate penitent is affected by an exact operative's whip into frenzy action, how many fight actions can it perform in an activation? Up to 4. 2 as a result of whip into frenzy, and 2 as a result of absolution through destruction. So this is kind of in the same category as the whole ignoring the entire stronghold for the purposes of obscuring, in that everybody looked at it, and everybody agreed that that's what the rule said, and everybody went, that can't possibly be the rule though, because it's dumb, right? And this is Games Workshop saying, no, we meant for you to have 4 fight actions. It's fine, novies are rotating out soon anyway. Pathfinders. Right. Okay. First sentence, change to read, once per battle, strategic gambit, if this operative is in the kill zone. So this is the Art of War rule. They've put this, if the operative's in the kill zone rule, on a lot of things. We're going to see it on a lot of things. I have no concept as to why. You'd think it might have something to do with Raveners or Aquilons, because they currently have ways to be either in orbit or in their tunnel where they're in the game but not on the kill zone. So my question is, we're expecting a new kill zone in the next box. Is that kill zone or something about it going to have either the kill zone has like a warp portal or a mine shaft or something, or maybe they're going to put in equipment that's like 2 hatchways and you can disappear in one and then next activation disappear out the other, or something like that. I don't know. But maybe there's some rule coming in the next season that removes you from the kill zone and then puts you back in. Or maybe it's just really, really, really like asinine. Like, oh, well, this technically isn't implied, so we'll put this in here to tidy up the rules. But at the moment, I think it doesn't really do anything. Unless there was a contingent of people out there that thought, well, my guy's dead, or I've not selected him, so I'm still going to use this rule because I don't know. Good. Wrecker Crew. So we've got the same thing as the Sanctifiers for the salvo rule on the boss knob. You can't shoot twice at the same thing. Flipping, obviously, guys, like, I get so stressed going through the FAQ because it's like, who are the Muppets that are trying to play this way? Question: if a Wrecker Crew bomb squig is incapacitated during a door fight or hatchway fight action, the other operative in that action is the other operative in that action a secondary target for the shoot action caused by the boom rule? So, okay, answer: not as a result of the door fight or hatchway fight rules, but the kaboom firefight ploy may cause that other operative to become a valid target for some hatchway fights. So the way this works, as you should know, when you're hatchway fighting, you have to be in base-to-base contact with the door, but it extends your melee range out to 2 inches, 3 inches, right, into the room, okay? When a bomb squig dies, it has to roll to see if it can explode. If it explodes, its explosion is a 1-inch blast centered on itself. So normally, if it's in a normal close combat, because 1 inch is also engagement range, the people it's in combat with will always be in range of its explosion. So I guess some people were assuming or getting confused. Oh, if I'm in combat with it, it can explode and hurt me. Well, no, you have to be within an inch, right? And because the hatchway fight allows that to be usually more than an inch away, you're not necessarily within an inch, right? It's just a case of people trying to think it a certain way because it makes sense to them logically or thematically, or it feels fair, but it's not the rules. And then the thing about the kaboom firefight ploy, the kaboom firefight ploy lets you increase your blast range to 2 inches. So what it's saying is, well, it wouldn't be in range as a result of the door fight or hatchway fight rules, but if you had another rule, like this kaboom rule, that extended the range of your blast, then you could still hurt them. Use the kaboom thing, yeah? And then finally, we've got if a Wrecker Crew Crusher operative. So the Crusher's one of these guys that can punch people and they move backwards and the Crusher follows up. If the Crusher operative using its smash weapon rule moves an enemy operative, and during that move a marker that would end its action is within the enemy operative's control range, e.g. Hurricane Jaeger's Ion Break Hex Psi Mines, that's a thing, but not the Crusher operative's control range, does the fight action end. So if you move an opponent's model onto its own mine, does it do anything? No. Fine. Yeah. Hearthkin salvages. Right. Proximate firepower. It says additional text added to the end. This can allow you to apply or remove the hit stat changes during an action. This takes precedence over the core rules. Okay. The proximate firepower rule says it's a strategic ploy, playing the strategic ploys phase, and it says you get +1 to hit when you're shooting something that's within 6. Super simple. Shouldn't need FAQing. This is saying that the plus or minus can come in and out during the action. That implies the existence of an action somewhere on the Hearthkin team that I don't remember, where you can start shooting somebody and then you'd be like, great, they're not within 6, I don't get my +1, or they're within 6, I get my +1, but as a result of you shooting them, they move to within 6 or outside of 6, they move in some way, and then it's saying that you can get the plus or minus 1, because normally you'd be locked into the status that you were in when you said, right, I'm doing a shoot action, that's cool, your plus minus hit can't change, during the action. So you say, right, I'm doing this, you'd measure, and then it would happen. There must be some rule somewhere where you can say, I'm going to shoot him, and then he moves somehow, either closer or further away, before you roll the dice. Off the top of my head, I can't think what that is. So let me know in the comments if you do think what that is. But it must be pretty, like, it has to trump a core, because they went out of their way, didn't they, to make, your stats can never change inside an action, a pretty core rule. And now they're saying, actually, except for this. And I'm like, I can't even work out when that will come up. But there it is. Let me know if you know when it will come up. Let me know. And then they got two things: the tactician and the eye of the ancestors. You have to be in the kill zone. So cool. And then finally we've got it's the health. So basically the thing we just read for the crusher operative using the smash weapon rule, it's the same thing now for the Harkin Salvager dozer operative performing the Nux smash weapon rule. Cool. Mandrakes. If two Mandrake Dirgemore operatives select each other with their hunting focus, which operative activates in the following instance? Operative A is set to activate normally. Then Operative B would attempt to activate it first as a result of the hunting focus, and then Operative A would attempt to activate it first as a result of the same rule. It goes to act Operative B. I wonder if this ever actually happened in gameplay, or if this is just somebody like reading the rules and going, "Oh, what would happen in this case? I better send that in." Because it's a bit silly, but it's not as silly and game breaking. It's not like there is no obvious answer, so they didn't need to rule on it because you just need to break out of the infinite loop somewhere. So they've decided where it is, and that's their role as the writer of the rules. So I'm not angry about this FAQ. I just think it's kind of funny. The second one, question: when a Mandrake Dirgemore is shooting with its horrifying scream ranged weapon and negatively changes the target's APL as a result of the stun weapon rule, does that change affect defense dice roll for the target during that same sequence in relation to the soul strike weapon rule? No, because an operative's core stats don't change during an action because that's core rules, except for the weird dwarf edge case on the previous slide. But there you go. Farstalker Kim band. They have to be in the kill zone with the kill broker, and their pistolier salvo has to actually select two different valid targets. Cool. Harkin Jaegers, something has to actually be in the kill zone. Cool. Battleclade. So, servile surrogacy. This is one of those what's been coined as a get down, Mr. President. I don't actually enjoy that, but that seems to be what the community understands. That it's like Super Conceal, but it's a less easy name than Super Conceal. But that kind of rule, okay. And they were all normalized in the same way. And obviously, the Battlecade rules were written before that, right? And now, so they've been normalized, so it's the same as all other rules of that kind. And then it's exactly the same for the nano suture array rule. That's been normalized as well, right? So there's no real changes there, and they haven't put in that. They haven't put in that it's like, oh, you have to lose an APL or anything else like that. It's just normalized it in a way that won't really change. They've normalized the wording, but nothing will actually change. And then, rules commentary. Question: if my opponent uses a rule that would cancel or interrupt when I would activate an operative, e.g. Nemesis Claw's Vox Scream or the Mandrake Dirgemore's Hunting Focus, can I use System Exorcism Firefight Boy to stop my opponent's rule from taking effect? Yes. System Exorcism can be used anywhere within the would activate rule resolution order, before interrupt effects, after Firefight Ploy is taking precedence over the rules, as the player with the initiative deciding. Basically, I think it's probably a reasonable rule of thumb to assume that System Exorcism just is the trump card in the deck. But if you're trying to do something and it looks like maybe System Exorcism could stop it happening, then it can. And maybe it's just the secret sauce of the Battleclade, right? But that's cool. That's cool. Give the Battleclade something cool that they can do. That's nice. Hunterclade. They gained the Imperium keyword. This is a mechanical nerf because it means that the Nemesis Claw can use Death to the False Emperor against you. But they should have had the Imperium keyword, so good. Inquisitorial agents, various things. They have to be in the kill zone, obviously. Next. The Chaos Cult. Okay, so this is the next one. There's going to be a repeated pattern. I'm going to call this Funny Little Timing Change. They've added the clause before or after it performs an action to a bunch of things to basically say that you can't do it in the middle of an action. In this case, it's used this firefight ploy to it's a buff that you turn on. It's just saying that you have to atomically do it before or after an action. Cool. Changes nothing really, unless you're a weirdo. Scout Squad, the funny little timing change as applied to another ploy, Raw Physiology. The Brood Brothers. So, worth talking about. All operatives gained the Tyrannid keyword. Unlike the Hunterclade gaining Imperium, nothing exists that interacts at the moment with the Tyranny keyword. Now, a commonly wishlisted team that people really want would be the Death Watch. If Night Lords can have a ploy that calls out specifically the Imperium, it's quite possible to me that Death Watch are going to have some sort of rule that's like, oh, against Tyranids, you can do this. Against Orcs, you can do this. Against the Perfidious Eldar, you can do that, right? That would make sense, right? People wouldn't like that rule. People seem to really hate the Night Lord's Imperium rule because people hate flavor. I don't know. But I do just think this might be maybe I'm reading too much into the tea leaves, but to me this screams the idea that, oh, Death Watch, it could be something else. It could be Ultramarines Tyrannic War Veterans, I guess, but that's so much less cool than it being Death Watch. So I'm going to take this as a sign that Death Watch are coming to Kill Team soon, and I'm going to be bitterly disappointed when my own BS doesn't pan out. How about that? And then something Commander Operative Coordinate Fire Rule, something has to be in the kill zone. Angels of Death. Okay. The tilting shields. So the tilting shields are a once per turning point item, right? So this is saying that the Space Marine player has to declare they're using their tilting shields, which means that, like, if you have lethal 5-up, for example, your lethal 5-ups don't count as crits, they count as normal hits. After they declare they're using their tilting shields, you can re-roll your 5s. You can, if you want to try and re-roll them into 6s. I think it's pretty niche, but it does mean that if you are fishing for crits, like it means that you can commit, you know, because you might be like, oh, I got lethal 5-up, I need a crit that would kill him. I'll fish for a crit because it's got a 1 in 3 chance of happening. They have to commit to whether they're using tilting shields or not before you reroll any of your dice, spend any of your CP, or even use your free reroll if you're in the Assault Doctrine. No. Well, yes, if you're Angels of Death versus other Angels of Death, right? I think that's basically how it was already being played by, like, me and Zimba, right? But yeah, it's nice that they have clarified it, because I can't remember how we would have played it, to be perfectly honest with you. But it's such a minor little tweak. It breaks their streak of never errataing or FAQing the Angels of Death, though, so I guess they felt it important enough to change their own, like, apparent rule on that. That's cool. Rattlings. A couple of people have erroneously reported this as a nerf to Rattlings. It really isn't. It's just, it used to say they had to have heavy terrain within control range, and now it says they have to have heavy terrain within 1 inch. Same. Maybe somewhere there's. Is this to stop you going like, oh well, I'm gonna hatchway fight, and now, but then you'd be near a hatchway, so I can't work out what they've done, but they've literally changed the words has heavy terrain within control range to has heavy terrain within an inch. If you understand why, let me know in the comments. Right? Raveners. Raveners have gained weird little timing change so that a ploy slithering evasion has to be done atomically before or after an action. It cannot split an action in half. Cool. Hand of the Archon. Power from Pain. The second sentence of the paragraph changed to read, you cannot use more than one invigoration per activation or counteraction except simulated senses, which can be used once per activation or counteraction in addition to another invigoration. They've just put more words in to make it mean the same thing. I can't work out what anybody could have thought that Power from Pain could have meant other than what it now means, but they've used more words, and so again, maybe it's English as an initial language people it's clearer for, or maybe they've just got a style guide now that's telling them to make things more clear. Fine, yeah. And then the cunning rule on the Arch Sybarite, you have to be in the kill zone. Commandos. So commandos have got the same thing about bomb squigs. That means that being in just because you're in melee because of a rule like a hatchway fight, you're still not within an inch for the explosion. It just says no. It doesn't go on about the kaboom ploy because, of course, commandos don't have the kaboom ploy, but otherwise it's the same rule because the bomb squig is the same operative. Cool. Tempestus Aquilons, they have a thing, the salvo weapon rule again, which props to James Workshop. I like the way that most of the time this rule that does the same thing has the same name, and the name is salvo. That's good. Now, if only salvo was a weapon rule in the weapon rules section in the core book, and then they could change it once. But next edition, because weapon rules are the one place where we do have universal special rules, but then they had to invent salvo, which is a new one, even though it's on Aquilons, which were the first team released with the new core rules. So why isn't this in the weapon rules page with all the other weapon rules like blast and torrent and devastating and things like that? I don't know. But yeah, salvo has to be 2 different targets. Good. Goremongers. The Blood Herald operative Corn's Favor rule has got the weird little timing change that doesn't do anything except to weirdos. They're trying to break the game. That's fine. And then in the rules commentary, we've got this question. If a melee weapon has the balanced or relentless weapon rule as part of the enhanced violence strategic ploy and is then used as a ranged weapon as a result of the wrist chains faction equipment, does the new ranged weapon still have balanced or relentless? No. And that is actually the opposite to the way I would have assumed it worked, right? I would have thought you could carry the buff over, but you can't. For those of you not familiar, wrist chains allows you to use your melee weapons as ranged weapons with a range of like 3 inches, I want to say, maybe 4 inches, something like that. And then next one, question, when determining whether a friendly operative's gore tank is full, for the purposes of the enhanced violence strategy ploy, do I check before or after decreasing its gore tank for any sanguine vitae for that action? Yeah, after. Obviously, like I read the rule. The rule just says whenever the gore tank is full or half full, do this. So obviously you would. I'm not sure what the argument was for why that might be before, but it's after. That's fine. Plague Marines. Last one. Curse of Rot. Second sentence change to read, for each result of 3 they roll, inflict 1 damage on the enemy operative. That result cannot be retained as a success, and they can't re-roll it. It used to say, treated as a fail, and they cannot re-roll it. What's the material difference between being treated as a fail and cannot be retained as a success? I don't know. I'm assuming there's some very niche rules out there that's like, does something with the number of fails you have, and this isn't a success or a fail, it's just a null dice. I don't know. Answers to that in the comments, please, because sometimes I really wish they provide their rationale as to why they're doing things, but they don't want to, so they're not going to start. And that's it. Final thoughts. So this was quite a long video. 50 minutes. Not really that much in the way of meaningful changes, right? What's actually going to change in your games as a result of this FAQ? I mean, I might have to start playing the entire of the stronghold is ignored for obscuring purposes when you're on the vantage point, which was, to be clear, always the rule. It just seemed really dumb. Do you have a different view to me? Do you understand why some of those obscure changes where I went, oh, tell me in the comments why this is? Do you understand? Please do tell me if you know why. And please tell me what you're referring to, because having to click the timestamps to work out what you're referring to is slightly annoying. Look at you, Mitch Tom. And also, please do subscribe, comment, like, etc. And consider to join the Discord. It's a great little community. And I want to say a big thank you to all my members, but especially to Alex, who is subscribed at the highest tier and gives me descends a truly enormous pile of cash onto my head every single month. My family and I thank you very highly. And if you want to I see your name up here in the pink neon tones of somebody with far too much excess cash, then there's a button there as well. But honestly, I would just become a member at the lower rate. Then you unlock everything cool. The other rates are just for having a different color name and showing off bling. But some people like bling, so that's nice. Some people like Alex. Thanks, Alex. Right, cheery bye, bye 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 bye, bye.